Great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ahmed. I have a background in dentistry from Iran and a master's in health research methodology from McMaster University in Canada. Today, I'll present our analysis of the relationship between democracy and scientific paper retractions across 167 countries. This is joint work with my colleague Hassam Salmabadi. I'm based in Toronto, Canada. I hope to meet you all in person. I really love to meet you all in person, but less than a week after my visa application, travel ban started again. I hope that I'll see you at the next Congress with a much stronger passport. Before diving into our study, let me address potential conflict of interest. I have no financial conflicts related to this work. I should note my role at Cytel Canada Health Incorporated and my advocacy for open science. Therefore, obviously, I'm in favor of my own research findings. In the interest of full transparency, I should also disclose my use of AI tools as below. Following best practices for responsible AI use in research, I use Claude Sonnet 4 chatbot to refine our abstracts clarity and organize these presentation slides. Importantly, all research design, data collection, analysis, and interpretation were conducted independently without AI assistance. Now let me provide context for why we conducted this study. We know scientific integrity is under scrutiny globally. While retractions serve as quality control, they also signal problems in the research pipeline. We hypothesized that democratic institutions might influence this process in two ways. First, by reducing misconduct through transparency, and second, by improving detection through stronger institutions. There is little research done on this topic, maybe because it's a sensitive topic. First time this came to my mind in 2019 when I was a research assistant in a research center in Tehran, and I witnessed many misconduct examples. Back then, we conducted a survey study, and whereas everybody lies, most probably towards null in this case, almost 3/4 of the medical faculties in Iran had witnessed instances of research misconduct during the previous year. In this screenshot, you can see the first study in this regard, which I published 3 years ago on OSF preprint. I used a much simpler methodology for that previous study that I published, I said, almost 3 years ago. This current study uses a much more sophisticated methodology, as I will go through in the next few slides. So what was our objective? Our primary goal was to quantify the relationship between countries' democratic status and their scientific paper retraction rates while controlling for other institutional and economic factors that might confound this relationship. Let me describe our approach. Through a retrospective cohort design, we analyzed over 64,000 retractions spanning 18 years across 167 countries. We use three major databases: Retraction Watch database for retractions, SciMago for publication counts, and Economic Intelligence Unit, or EIU, Democracy Index for democracy status. Our primary outcome was retraction rate per 10,000 publication to account for different publication volumes. We controlled for 10 potential confounders using Bayesian hierarchical models and negative binomial regression. This is important because wealthier countries publish more and might have different detection capabilities. Also, to put science before statistics, we draw this directed acyclic graph, or DAG, using DAGITY website. This helped us to minimize confounding and collider biases. So what did we find? Across 167 countries, democracy score ranged from highly authoritarian to fully democratic, with a median score of 5.71, ranging from 1.05 to 9.81. The higher, the more democratic. Also, the retraction rates varied dramatically from 0 in some countries to over 200 retractions per 10,000 publications. And the median for retraction rate was 5.3 per 10,000 publications. In these two maps, you can see the reverse association between democracy and retraction rates. On the top map, you can see mean retraction rate per 10,000 articles. And as you can see, generally countries with higher retractions have lower democracy. The bottom map is for mean democracy index from 2006 to 2023. And vice versa. Countries with lower retraction rates in the western side of the world have more democracy. This was also investigated using regression analysis, and higher democracy were associated with lower retraction rates. To be precise, the adjusted coefficient in log scale was minus 0.46, and as you can see, the credible interval did not cross 0. However, the relationship is nuanced. Rule of law shows a positive association, meaning countries with stronger rule of law actually have higher reported retraction rates. Corruption control shows the opposite pattern. Additional economic factors also revealed an interesting pattern. And in this slide, you can see a scatter plot. On the y-axis, you can see the mean retraction rate per 10,000 publication in log scale, and on the x-axis, you can see mean democracy index. And as you can see, the relationship is reverse or negative. Also, about economic and institutional factors, wealthier countries and those with more effective governments actually showed higher retraction rates. Rather than indicating more misconduct, this likely reflects better detection and reporting mechanisms. Richer countries have more resources to investigate and act on research integrity issues. Given the multiple, also it's very important to note this, given the multiple associations of the examined covariates, we acknowledge the potential for over-interpretation of coefficients, or in other terms, table 2 fallacy. And we emphasize that we need studies to confirm these findings, and we should not over-interpret the other factors that we assessed. So what do these findings mean for the scientific community? The relationship between democracy and retraction is complex. Democratic societies appear to have both lower baseline misconduct and better detection systems. This suggests two policy pathways. Investigating in democratic institutions may prevent misconduct, while strong governance capacities improve quality control. For the research community, this highlights that retraction rates aren't just measures of problems. They are also measures of institutional capacity to address problems. However, our study obviously has important limitations. Despite our longitudinal design, the first one, we cannot establish causality due to potential unmeasured confounders. Reporting bias is also a major concern. Some countries may systematically underreport retractions, which is also related to language bias. Language bias toward English publications may also affect our results. Also, and I believe it affects our results towards null. Also, it is important to mention that this study is at country level and cannot be extrapolated to individual researcher level, or we should be aware of ecological fallacy. Despite these limitations, we can draw some conclusions. Democratic governance is negatively associated with scientific paper retractions, but this relationship is mediated by institutional factors. Democratic societies demonstrate stronger capacity for detecting and addressing research misconduct. The policy implication is that the investments in democratic governance and institutional quality may contribute to scientific integrity. However, higher retraction rates in some contexts may paradoxically indicate better quality control rather than more misconduct. Thank you for your attention. And also, these results were just the preliminary results, and we are still developing the full protocol for it. You can see more real-time data using this URL and this QR code. I'm happy to take questions.
Hello, Maria.
And again, name and
Yeah, thank you. Maria Kowalczuk, Research Integrity Manager at Frontiers. Thank you for this really interesting presentation. It's a very interesting study. I have two questions. One is, how did you assign countries to papers? And the second question is, does the democracy index change over time? So, because the study could be done in 1 year, it could be retracted many years later. Could the democracy index change within that time frame, which can be long, and could this affect your results?
About the time changes, we just put the year that it was retracted, but we aim to do sensitivity analysis. That is exactly one of the sensitivity analysis that we considered in our preliminary protocol, which we publish, I hope, very soon. And about the country, we included all the countries of the authors. And if you go to Retraction Watch database, it includes all the countries of all the authors. And therefore, it's not just like we put a country for a paper. A paper might have several countries based on the affiliation of the authors.
That's a really interesting design. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Nihar Shah from Carnegie Mellon University. This is a very cool study, and the question itself was very surprising to me. And so I want to pick your brain going back to the time when you were formulating this question. And at that time, like, what was in your mind? Like, why did you think there could be an association between democracy index and the retraction rates?
Very good question. As I mentioned briefly in my presentation, the question came to my mind when I was in Iran, which has an authoritarian regime. And back then, I demonstrated that people, because there is actually there is no morality in the research area, at least in Iran, and they put people in the papers, they put their name, they conducted a lot of examples of misconduct. And I also demonstrated that these people that have conducted misconduct, when they go to other countries, especially Western countries, they don't do that. And I thought there might be some factors related to democracy, but also that's why we control for other institutional factors, because I was only interested in democracy, the sole effect of democracy, not democracy through some institutional factors. We controlled for everything that came to our mind. How does it affect researchers' behavior? Because I don't believe that it's because of individual people's behavior. It's because of the system's impact on researchers, not just whether they have morality or not. It's just the system. At least most part of it is based because of the system.
Hi, Randy Ellis, Harvard Medical School. I completely agree about the system and incentives playing a really big role, and this is a really excellent study. I'm wondering what kinds of factors in different countries might play into this. For example, if certain countries might have fewer universities or fewer job openings per capita or per set of scientists, could that incentivize a sort of race to the bottom in poor practices that might lead to retractions?
I believe that the most important thing is that there is no consequences for conducting misconduct in non-democratic countries. For example, I mentioned Iran a lot because my first years in research was in there. There is no consequences, and as you might have heard the news recently, many papers get retracted, but there is nothing ever is being done to the people that have done the misconduct. But that's not the case in some other countries that they care about research and research integrity. That might be the main factor. There are obviously a lot of other factors. For example, many non-democratic countries might don't really care about research because they don't put their research into context. They just publish. They don't use those researches for their industry because they don't have enough industry to use this research, and it's just a published paper and nothing more. But that's something that we are still thinking about, what factors might be influential, and I hope I can answer that question in our protocol that will be published soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Anna Balkina, Freie Universität Berlin. Thank you very much for your study. It's really, really interesting. And my question is, it just follows the last question about the factors and institutions. So in your study, you mostly make a conclusion that in democratic states, the detection is better than the totalitarian regimes, right? But probably the difference is not only in the detection, but also in violation of scientific ethics in different types of political regimes. For example, just as an idea, in many authoritarian regimes, there are excellence programs, like in China, in Saudi Arabia, in Russia, and so on, that make scholars to publish more, and this kind of publish and perish narrative makes them commit misconduct. So probably there is something in behavior that is, but not only in detection.
Yes, that's completely true. About the detection, I think, as I mentioned briefly, it puts even we are in this study only focused on English publications. The majority of publications in Iran and, for example, in China or in Russia or I think in India are in their own language. Therefore, if we put them into scrutiny, and I think there would be much more retraction than we see right now. That was the why I mentioned detection, that democratic countries, they publish in English, and also they have better mechanisms, which is not it does not exist in non-democratic countries. And about the behavior, I totally agree with you, and I have witnessed that, and it's very, very true. And yeah, I totally agree with you.
Johnny and Edith from Stanford. Very interesting analysis. Along with Jeroen Bas, we recently posted a preprint showing that full democracies used to account for about 2/3 of the published papers 20 years ago. Currently, they're down to 20%, and it's shrinking further. And authoritarian regimes are going to take the lead. They're already taking the lead in volume of publication. So what you describe fits nicely to a not nice narrative about the literature really becoming very corrupt in a way. At the same time, I worry whether we may be somehow victimizing the majority of researchers who are probably honest, and whether there may be some effect of reputational priming, that you see a paper from Iran or from China, and the threshold for an editor to retract may be much faster compared to a paper from Stanford or Harvard. I mean, do you think that might be an issue?
Totally, yeah, I totally agree that this stigmatization, I'm not promoting that stigmatization through my research. It's just an observational study, and we should take care of that by, I think transparency is very important in this case. If we promote transparency, that problem will go away. By transparency, meaning that we should encourage publishing data. If the data is being published, I know that it's not possible, but at least codes or metadata could be published, and through these mechanisms, we can be more thoughtful of whether the papers from if we reject this paper, not just because of they are from a non-democratic country, but because of their lower quality. And another thing that I want to mention is that because non-democratic countries are somehow an island without any connection to the industrial world, they don't have access to the best methodologies. They don't have access to educational material, and that might be another issue that these researchers face. They might have unintentionally they might conduct research misconduct, and they are not aware of this problem. So I mean, it's a very complex situation. We just need to shed light on each aspect of it and decide which area to improve and decide which area is most influential. But I'm not sure what to conclude at the end. What should we do about non-democratic countries? This is the first study, and then we can do something about that.